Welcome to Module 7 of Diverse Learners. The final module, you did it. Can you believe it? So the final paper and the final reading, any late reading responses, and then the final module's pure responses. A Friday, March 1st deadline, right? As per the course calendar, this is the AOS end of the course. This is it. It's not possible to hand in anything beyond that due date due to the end of the AOS calendar. I've set those deadlines as late as possible to give you every minute that you can. Obviously, extenuating medical personal circumstances notwithstanding that are documented. However, there is a very limited window to get that documentation to me and not have to deal with an incomplete grade. So there's very little time to deal with extenuating circumstances. So please be as proactive as you can. This final week is somewhat unique because of that Friday deadline. We have a Wednesday, February 27th. I got a typo in my talking points. 27th. Wednesday, February 27th at the end of the day. That's our adjusted deadline for the reading response, right? Wednesday night, and then Friday night is of course the deadline for the course paper and the peer response, all due to the AOS calendar. These dates have been publicized on the forum as well as the course syllabus and the course calendar. All term they've been on there. Make sure you get that final paper started early. If you have push yourself, right? If you haven't watched the additional video with Module 6 where I had some further suggestions about the final paper, definitely do that, and be reaching out with your questions regarding that final paper. The goal is full, confident, complete submission before the deadline by everybody. Right, that is the goal. Once you've submitted, obviously, please be patient as we complete the grading process. It's a complicated task, but we do it gladly, in as much quality as we can with the deadline in mind, right? So I devoted the final module to early childhood as a form of diverse learners. Because of the wild variety of their developmental needs, and a short New Literacies article connected to it. Many of you are early childhood or elementary ed teachers, and the very nature of young learners, which I'm sure you live every day in your job. It's diverse in its own right. It's from a standpoint of growth and development, right? So it presents those diverse qualities. Page 159. The early years are rapid and dramatic and shape long-term outcomes, right? No pressure, elementary teachers. The implications of 13 million children living below the poverty line. The implications of 40% of children belonging to a racial or ethnic group that does not match their teacher, that of their teacher. The implications of high-quality child care on the upcoming years of schooling, pages 159 to 160. These are factors that make this reality of the educational reality of early childhood education very difficult and very challenging sometimes. Head Start, page 161. It brings these factors together and it is intended to set kids up for greater success. As with page 161, these home-school relations require clear and respectful communication. Page 162, developmentally appropriate practice requires age appropriateness, social cultural appropriateness, and individual appropriateness. So developmentally appropriate practice has three branches, three main qualities, right? I love that our text talks about learning through play. Play is essential. Thank you, Vygotsky, one of the greats in education. Not only gives us permission, but encourages us to make sure that those young kiddos are learning through play, right? Page 164, active learning builds on children's motivation to explore and experiment during their learning. I have watched my 3-year-old explore and experiment. She has taken stuff and put it in bowls and snuck it into one of the lower shelves of the freezer just to see what happens to it when it freezes. I mean, kids like to explore and to experiment and to fiddle and mess with things. The trick is that they don't do that in a way that disrupts or damages the learning environment, but instead just plays to that curiosity, right? But also the motivation to explore and experiment. It's great if we can further tap their personal family backgrounds. That work. Culturally responsive curriculum on page 164. Woo! See Ladson Billings from Module 1. That's a great connection to see. Effective classroom practices on page 165 plus. This is a great section to look over. Some things should hopefully jump out at you. Which do you use? Which do you do, right? But more importantly, which ones do you wish that you could add to your teaching toolbox? Which ones do you wish you could say, sitting here, I've been doing that, right? No time like the present to come up with some goals, right? So our recommended article, New Literacies for New Learners, the Need for Digital Tech in Primary Classrooms. It's a great article. The first page cuts right to it, as any good short article should, right? Just jumps right in. On page 421, young children are uniquely positioned to learn about new literacies, especially those related to the internet. Research and practice often has focused on, let me start over. Young children are uniquely positioned to learn about new literacies, especially those related to the internet. Unfortunately, even from a broadly constructed, inclusive definition of new literacies, research and practice often have focused on older students, right? Furthermore, the interactive nature of digital literacies, and the internet in particular, is especially suited to the needs and learning styles of young children. It is imperative to integrate new literacies learning into all primary grade classrooms. Pretty intense call there, right? So consider this. Consider the implications of being behind in reading by third grade relative to catching up. That's a tricky enough matter, right? If you are a third grader, that's a year or 2 years behind in literacy. That's some tricky intervention work to get that third grader caught up in a reasonable time. What if you were behind on new literacies and digital practices by third grade, when those practices are going to be infused to all learning activities or a great deal of them, right? That means you've got a digital gap to close with students as well. Equity of access is important. Page 422, integrating new literacies into classroom instruction at a young age becomes especially critical for many economically disadvantaged students where the technology and the digital practices may not necessarily be as present at home. Page 423, continuing our constructivist thread from Module 6, right? Used appropriately, these communication tools support readers both locally and globally for learning. The highly interactive nature of the internet and other digital tools may hold special learning opportunities for young children that sometimes are overlooked in schools. I find that very interesting. Considering their conclusion prior to the references, this short piece is a call for action. That's really what they're doing with this. Each of you, as an educator and as a do-in practitioner of the craft, the art and craft of teaching, has the potential to be an action researcher. In fact, this is the other course that I'm teaching right now with our EDS students, right? So my challenge to you as a professor, what new literacies approaches could you deploy in your classroom? What claim or hypothesis could you make about an anticipated outcome, which we often call learning objectives? What evidence of the outcome could you collect and analyze, which we often call assessment data? And what conclusions might you be able to draw that you could share that might shape or change the field of education, which we've called reflective practice? It's a call to action. So if the article is indeed a call for action, we have to imagine ourselves acting upon the call. Which is exciting to think about too. Hope you enjoyed that article. I think it starts out with a punch and it really just drives through. It's kind of thrilling. Then our dispositional highlight, nurturing young readers how digital media can promote literacy instead of undermining it. Right. This is a very interesting article. Levine has co-authored with Jim G, by the way, on some of the connections between gaming and literacy. So it's good to give a bit of a voice to a teacher's association. It's also an engaging piece for practitioners. So is the opening scene familiar, right? As teachers and parents, right away, Belle inserted herself as a guide when the kids had the app repeating the word critter, right? Critter. They quickly came to an interesting conclusion. Considering how the brain must be trained to read, are the kids deeply engrossed in the digital classroom media? Are they experiencing a nurturing or disadvantaging environment, right? If there is too much digital media going on, are we hampering the literacy learning, right? Well, they think it can be done, and they think it can be done right. So the laying the foundation for literacy section should be familiar to us. Page 3, more than 2/3 of American students are struggling to comprehend what they read, and this can reach among up to 80% among underserved populations. Pretty staggering number there. The precursors of reading begin in infancy, page 3 to 4, and once they enter preschool, children are ready for more specific emergent literacy skills, page 4. These are paragraphs that should resonate well with those of you who have taken principles of Lit Cog already, I hope. Thus, the next two points in the article. It makes good sense to advocate for deeper and smarter investments in infant and toddler programs. How to make sure digital tools are harnessed and used in service of conversation and rich adult-child interactions, right? So those digital tools cannot be technology for technology's sake. They have to serve a pedagogical purpose, right? Note the Cooney Center survey, page 6 in the middle, that access to phones and apps is not a magic solution, right? If technology is not used properly in learning, it can actually widen that education gap. So out of an analysis of 200 apps that serve user ages from birth to age 8, more than 50% focused on teaching children to recognize letters and sounds of the alphabet, with less than 10% of those apps, less than 20, focusing on comprehension, and even less focusing on fluency and expression. Pretty interesting. They note at this point in the article that the American Academy of Pediatrics did not appear to be a fan of screen-based tools at all. But that'll come back. Digital media are not some monolithic force. Screen context, the way kids respond to it, the communities in which kids use media is what can make a huge difference. It's from page 8. 2015 was a big year for screen-based learning research. 2015 was because pediatrics changed its tone a little bit, right? Author noticed that simply handing kids ebooks, right? Simply handing them an iPad or a Kindle with a digital text, that's not enough, right? Need to guide and become more involved with the kindergartners and how they use the Story app. Her explicit teaching presence was necessary, and that's not at all a new concept in literacy, right? We know that teaching literacy should be explicitly taught, right? The authors say we need a third way, a new approach that is human-powered first and tech-assisted second. Love that line. But we already know this, right? I find it interesting that the authors are calling for this. We already know this, that you, the teacher, and your teaching license come first as the explicit presence in that classroom, right? So luckily the next several pages unpack several perspectives with promise. That I thought the nosy cow was great, personally. Ultimately, the presence of teachers and adults makes a big difference. Page 12. Their final reminder, it's what I think is a rather unavoidable fact. The children and families of the 21st century will grow up with screens and digital media everywhere, and educators and parents will need new models for how to use these tools to promote learning. With that in mind, right, if they're everywhere, if they need to be used, we should be introducing these digital tools right away at the very beginning, and it should be integrated into the learning process. It should be pedagogically woven in appropriate ways. Okay, so it has been a pleasure working with you. I've tremendously enjoyed working with all of you as a group. You jumped right into the content. I will always appreciate how by week 2 you were sending me emails with ahas and fascinations, and this was a great idea, and there were a lot of email exchanges about what to do with ELL learning in week 2 that really showed me that a lot of you were really thinking about this content and really trying to do something with it, and that means a great deal to me. I love that. So I hope to hear from you further, hope to engage with your thinking and raise the bar down the road in Practicum 2, which is the other course in MSc Reading that I teach, and Practicum 2 is my jam, my bread and butter. For some of you, this will kick off right away in spring 2, very shortly, but I think most of you it'll be summer or fall. And when that happens, I can't wait to see what you discover in your next round in that course as well. But in the meantime, please don't ever hesitate to reach out by email. That's what I'm here for. I'm here anytime. Keep in touch. I'm looking forward to working with you again in your future scheduling of Practicum 2. Wolves up